Okay, so I have a question about it has a lot to do with construction guarantees.
Hmm.
This was a while ago, but I had a client buy pre-construction. They're taking delivery, and the condo is not completely done.
There's a hole in the ground.
No, it was like 95% done.
Okay.
And the guy they're trying to get us the arrangement on this one was 35%, 65% at delivery.
Okay.
So they want their money.
Yeah.
And I walk through with the camera and I'm saying this. And so the broker calls me up and he says, Fletcher, he says, look, Profeco guarantees these things for 1 year. Have your client sign and pay right now, or we're going to try to sell it to somebody else for a higher price. And I knew it was BS,
Hmm.
but it got me to thinking anybody that is pressed into that situation, can they actually, what are the odds that somebody like Profeco is going to force that developer to make something that, let's just say they thought it was good, they thought
Hmm.
it was 100%, and they find out like something's like a pipe bust or whatever.
Yeah.
What are the odds that they can go to, a bureaucratic entity and get something done as a foreigner? What's your experience just on that?
Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things. One of them, Profeco is an arbitration proceeding, and in order for arbitration to work, there has to be the meeting of the minds. There has to be a willingness on both parties to accept the resolution. So it's a voluntary proceeding. So obviously, if one of the parties says, forget this, I'm not going that route, there's nothing Profeco could do to strong arm someone to accept that. That's where the courts have to come in. So it's not the best solution to say that Profeco, which is the Consumer Rights Protection Agency in Mexico, is going to fill in the deficiencies of any builder. With that said, there's actually a process where you come in and they summon this person. Hey, this is a request on the part of this aggrieved party, and they send out. If they don't go to the hearing, they can be fined, and the fines can get hefty. They look into with Hacienda, with SAT, the Mexican IRS, and they say, well, if you don't come to this next hearing, to basically they call it a conciliation hearing, and we're going to fine you, and it kind of compounds after that. However, since it is again a voluntary proceeding, it's like, well, if you get a resolution, good luck with that. You have to then go to the courts and enforce it. So it really doesn't make a lot of sense to have Profeco kind of in the back of your mind to say, okay, I have that to fall back on. No. What you have to do is this 35%, 65% arrangement was really good as far as percentage goes because they were very incentivized in delivering, and you say that it was 95% done. So all these are just punch list items. So just a general walkthrough. Hey, if you do that, you're going to get your money, right? But don't expect your money before closing. Don't expect your money before transfer of title. That's where, and over the past year and a half, because of the hot market, because of all this red tape, because of COVID, all these measures, we sometimes shifted the focus of transfer of title at balance to a soft closing and possession, which is not the best of things, but you kind of get in the middle of these scenarios, or you can't get the best of both worlds, but at least you have possession. And the developer has maybe 80% of the purchase price, 90% of the purchase price, and they're just 10% holding back on closing because the condo regime is not done, which should have been done to begin with. The construction license, the termination notice, there's a host of things that have to happen with construction. And if that is not in place, then the problem, you kind of circle back and say, well, why am I entertaining giving the full purchase price if I haven't gotten title? Because when you do have 100% funds delivered, what's the incentive to the seller? It's like, well, I already got my money. And I can tell you tens of cases I've had to look into, either through the courts or just short of court resolution, because again, they could care less. And after they put this product out, sold it, they have no inventory, and they could care less. And there's a lot of things that have happened. So With that in mind, the part where you need to kind of be very careful is the hidden defects and all these things. Under statute, under the civil code, you have a blanket period of vicios ocultos or hidden defects. Depending on that, if it's like structural items which are not apparent, obviously you're not an architect or an engineer by trade, you don't know, the things are all the shabby. You just look at the paint, right? You just look at apparent things. So you do a home inspection, and the home inspection is a bit more thorough. I've had architects that have been paid by the buyer to just do a very thorough walkthrough, especially when it comes to construction that's already there. It's been 10, 15 years there, and so you obviously have certain items, maintenance wise, that have to be taken care of, and you have pictures and this and that. So that's just common knowledge just to have that. But let's say that nothing is apparent, everything is great, and you have all of a sudden these humidity or the ceiling, and then it starts leaking, and you would know about this, maybe 6 into possession. So you have a 1-year period, You can extend it by contract for whatever time. Normally it would be a 2-year, especially when it comes to new components like electrical components like a washer, dryer, or dishwasher, because the problem is that if you time that as to the initial private contract rather than the closing, you already have that running. So then when they're already installed, you have like 6 months ago, and instead, it's 2 years. Yeah, it's been 2 years as of when. So you kind of eat up all that time. So you have that. And then there's other ways to protect yourself, which are through bonds. And there's 3 bonds you can do with a surety company, a fianzadora. You have the hidden defects bond, fianza por vicios ocultos. But obviously, to begin the process with the bonds, the first one would be fianza de cumplimiento, which is a performance bond. Obviously, you have the buyer protected if the seller doesn't perform construction. So that's a really important one. There's one that could be done regarding the fianza de anticipo. If you do a down payment towards a unit, and if it doesn't come to pass at a certain time, you just go in and execute the bond, and then let them worry about, let the seller worry about with their surety company. So those 3 bonds, the fianza de anticipo, the advance bond, if there is substantial money is given towards that, fianza de cumplimiento, the performance bond, and then fianza de vicios ocultos, which is after the construction process is done. So you have those things to go. But again, if any developer seller says no, that's a red flag. It's like, hey, if you're so sure about your product, then you need to know that I would like to be protected. And so that's when a lot of people say, well, I have this guy next to me that doesn't require all these things. I'll just sell it to him. And to your point where they said, I'm going to sell it to another party, that's fraud. Right there, that's fraud, because they can't sell, to be honest, that same unit.
I called the bluff, and there was no more talk about that.
Obviously, yeah. And I'm looking into a transaction that we're hopefully signing tomorrow. After all this time, and there is an issue over the holdback, and there's either 15 and 20% holdback on that specific transaction, and they're the broker's like, well, my client should get that money. He's like, no, your client's going to get your money at closing. And closing has taken a long time because of all these other issues with the construction, and that's something that was really very difficult to even to protect that part, because we didn't know, because there were certain documents that were not proper, but they were there, right? But it turns out that those documents were not legitimate. So that's like an extreme example of what you can do, but we kept the process straight and the seller engaged, because we had this holdback. And so they're like, hey guys, you need to fix this, and that. And so it obviously turns to all these issues with the performance, with the hidden defects. But yeah, Profeco is almost a non-starter in my book. But again, I've used Profeco on certain things. It just depends on who your seller is. There are certain what we call normas oficiales mexicanas. There's official norms that you can do. But again, it's a voluntary scenario. It does let's say, give some comfort, but it comes down to who you're dealing
just
with.
get it done right.
Yeah, and if you're dealing with a reputable developer, and even then, things happen with people that have a track record, and they kind of bank on that, and they still go south. Well, those are the types of things that we at least try to avoid. But yeah, obviously, giving monies towards this process, pre-construction pricing is very tricky. Well, when people come in and say, "Well, we have this to go on," it's just this part of this conversation as well. How much is prudent to ask of any seller? You really can't. Let's say this in simple terms. You can't over ask all these things because they know they're going to say, sorry, we're going to go on to the next one, and then your client, the buyer who really wants that product, you kind of also you have to address those and put these things on balance. Like if you really want this house, well, there's a way we can do this the right way, at least more safeguards in place. It's not going to be a perfect process if there are certain things in there, but at least we can try and help them in that situation, because again, the emotional part is very difficult to deal with. People get enamored by a certain product, and all of a sudden, logic just goes out the window, and then even common sense.
As far as the developer fixing defective, I find it's almost a function of price point. So the deal that I just talked about, it was a lower price point. And then there's a golf course on the Pacific side, and this buyer came in. They were like, "Hey, your unit's ready." he was shocked about it, so he didn't actually have his money ready. So he went in with like blue tape and all this. Like he turned the shower on, and the water sat there, and it didn't funnel down. So he had him like bust out all the. My point being, they actually went in and he got his a month later, and they fixed everything. And I was sitting there, I was like, there's no way this first developer, which was a lower budget, would have even done that.
Oh, yeah.
So it does go off the developer reputation.
Yeah.
But some of these, I've seen it where, like, if somebody's complaining about something, they're just kind of like, hey, we'll take this back and sell it for a higher price to somebody.
Yeah, which again, you can't go back into inventory. Normally there's a private purchase and sale agreement. There you can't walk away from that readily. Sometimes even if you do get your money back. But again, if we're talking about someone who wants to establish a good reputation, they go in and do all these things, right? And so that's why they have this blue tape and the walkthrough and the punch list. And there's a normal period of, hey, fix it, give me 15, 20 days to fix this, and we'll go back and get the balance. But again, because of all these units that are being built out now, and they're shelling out all these things, they're kind of doing it backwards. They start construction and they have all this, and then all of a sudden, hey, where's the condo regime? Well, you can't give me title then because you have individual units there right now. They're physically there, but legally speaking, you don't have your own tax code, property tax code ID on that unit. You can't sell it as far as transfer of title goes. You can probably just give it possession, but that's not. I mean, why should we just entertain this? And I know why. It's economics, because they want the money in the door first, get pre-pricing, get all this funds, and then we go, oh, okay, we'll fix the condo regime, and then, oh yeah, but by the way, it's going to take eight months, right? So people are there, they're physically in the unit, they don't have title, and then what happens if the company goes bankrupt or they skip town or whatever, and then we have to go in either through the court to just figure out who is the successor in interest and get their signature and hope that they do the right thing. And sometimes you just have to work with that, and it tends to be tricky to address those situations as they come along. But again, the majority of things are or can or should be avoided.
Nice. Just another day in Cabo real estate. So
trouble in paradise, you come to me.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you for your time, Eduardo. And we'll keep them rolling. Thanks.
Yeah, welcome.